a representation. Yeah, but we were more asking something like, where is the image? Because just by trying to map the different encounters with images and the different situations where they can be encountered, gives us a sort of map, a kind of territory. Yeah, and the more we ask these questions about where actually the artwork is situated it situated in the gallery? Is it situated in the experience of the beholder, of the audience? Is it simply situated purely in the mind of the artist, as Duchamp, for instance, wanted to say? Then we start to get a kind of a more multi-dimensional sense of what is the image about. I'm just looking at my notes because they're also So, yes. So, we've been asking, where is the image? And I think through this inquiry, we started to get the sense that for a very long time, images, at least in this Western culture, images have been understood through a philosophical perspective, through a philosophical framework that we broadly call Platonic. Yeah? That understands images as reflections or references of something real and tangible. Yeah? Now, of course, everyone around this table already knows that. So that's kind of not surprising at all. But we also started to get the sense that whenever this is your way of thinking about images, you automatically begin to privilege your analytical or intellectual grasp of reality over your sensual grasp of reality. Yeah? Now, why that happens? Why this representational framework privileges the intellectual over the sensual? Is it so? Does it make sense? Why that is the case? It's because in the Platonic model, the sensual world, the world of things, is secondary to the world of ideas. Yeah? The world of things, how do we know about things? How do we know that this book is kind of soft and smooth and hard and square? Well, I know it through my senses. I know that it's smooth by touching it. I know that it's square by looking at it. Yeah, and I know it through my senses. In Plato, these sensory experiences are secondary to what the intellect or the mind can tell you about reality. Because the mind can penetrate these surface effects and get to their deeper essence. Yeah? So in this Platonic model, what is sensual is always secondary to the intellectual. It's interesting that you can see how this approach is prevalent kind of everywhere. In the example I probably gave you too many times, you might be allergic to it by now, is the example of the builder and the architect. Did we speak about that? Yeah? How come, both build houses? So whom would you rather marry? Whom would you rather have at the dinner party? Why we so automatically think that architect is a higher role or higher calling than the builder? both build houses. One does it physically, the other does it intellectually. Yeah, but we automatically, it's not about, I know that there are significant differences in what they do, and all of that is true. I just want to point, and it's not really trying to prove anything, but maybe just to show how in our everyday, the intellectual is always privileged over the physical, almost always. Or it's just interesting to see all the various contexts in which the sensual seems to be well, that was actually very good, very much to the point. We need to shut this noise because we need to concentrate on some important ideas. Yeah, so we have to exclude all the sensory stimuli, and so we have this space to think. But that's very interesting how this look at children education. Look how much, let's say, attention is given to the body, to the senses, and how much attention is given to honing the intellect. Yeah? And how from very early age this distinction is taught. Hey, come in. This yeah. No, come here. How from very early age this distinction is taught between the intellectual and the physical, and how imperceptibly on so many levels you're being led to believe that the intellectual is where it's really at. Yeah? And the body is the sort of unfortunate, messy, leaky vehicle. Yeah? And there is a problem with that. Yeah? There is a problem with that. So this representational image, that photographic image, this image which operates as a window on something out there which is real, and the image is secondary to the real, this becomes the image of the mind. This becomes the image of the intellect. Okay? So then the question might be asked, if you are so inclined, but what about the body after all? What about, does the body have an image? Is there an image of the senses? Is there an image of the senses? Now, Deleuze comes and says, yes, there is. And what is its name? The simulacrum. The simulacrum is the image of the senses, in the same way that the representational image, the mimetic image, the image that corresponds with the reality, is an image of the mind. Yeah? Right. So this is a kind of a crude approximation of where what we have been reading in Deleuze's essay on simulacrum. The simulacrum is an image for Deleuze of being as such, not being mediated by the intellect, but being. When being makes an image, it is simulacrum. Or when being as an image is simulacrum. Yeah? Because what is simulacrum? Simulacra is not, the object we presented as an example of simulacra was, of course, Duchamp's ready-made, the fountain. Yeah? And we said how it is not a picture of an object, it is an object. So, but it is also just something that is. And that is the deep, somehow significant difference between the representational image and the simulacrum. The representational image always somehow accepts as a given the operation of the mind that draws resemblance. Yeah? So just be mindful of this fact whenever you are involved in your practice. I mean, whenever you are. Because I think if we take the simulacrum seriously, then it becomes quite clear that there is no real line to draw between life and art. According to the logic of simulacrum, life is art. Why do I say that? Why do I say, according to the logic of simulacrum, life is art? What do you think?
What you're going to be producing is part of your being.
Why is that? I think you're right, but why is that?
Because it's coming from your within.
It's coming from, yeah, because this approach captures art in its broad sense as bringing something to being, as making something, creating something. When you understand art in this broad sense, not as making fine art objects, but as bringing something into being, then that is also what we understand by life. What is life? It's a kind of process that makes things. Yeah, life makes life. Yeah, life is continuously self-generating. So when you start thinking about art from the perspective of simulacra, then life and art lose this clear-cut boundary between them. You know, as we said when we looked at the Rodin's thinker sculpture, it's very, very clear that the sculpture is not a person, but it is a mimicry of a person. It refers to a person. Real, imaginary, collective caricature doesn't matter, but there is a reference to it which is outside it. Yeah? And that is the representation of image. In the simulacrum image, the simulacrum doesn't have this boundary that separates it from life. The mimetic logic does not apply to the simulation. It's not operating along the lines of resemblance. It somehow does it in a different way. Yeah? And we get to think about art then, not via distinction, life art, but via something like life is art. Yeah? And for that reason, the urinal is simply a urinal. You could take it off the pedestal, install it in the toilet, and you could piss it.
So then the task of the artist is just to make interesting life, rather than if everybody's an artist.
I didn't say that everybody is an artist. I said that the distinction between art and life is not clear-cut anymore. It's much more blurred. What that makes of the artist, or what is the task of the artist, I think it's still an open question. It's more of an open question, yeah, because clearly it's not the task of the artist to make beautiful anymore. Because beautiful is just the heightened expression of the visual. Yeah? The visual as that by which we identify certain objects as belonging to art and not belonging to the everyday. So yes, the notion of the beautiful somehow seems to be clearly attached to the representational way of thinking. What becomes the role of the artist is a contested question. You know, it is very different. You might say that perhaps art is just about making interesting, and I think that has a lot of support, this way of thinking. But I don't think that's the only way you could think about it. But I think what does come out so that if we understand art, and if art is the most immediate expression of life, and we know that life is about making new life, then the role of the artist, suppose, seems to be making new. Making new as in keeping the door open for something new to happen, or maintaining the possibility of something new to happen. That, by the way, is also immediately becoming a question of politics, because there's clearly a branch of politics known as conservatism that doesn't want new to happen, that actually writes on its, takes as its motto that old ways are best. So of course, if as an artist you see your task as making new, that is already a political position. Yeah, because making new suggests, or at least maintains, the possibility that the current state of affairs is not the only one, is not the perfect one, that something else is possible. Yeah. The very possibility of something else being possible becomes the politics of art. So you might say that the representational image often finds itself assuming a political position for this, against that, this is wrong, while the
an apolitical position.
Apolitical, not the apolitical, sorry. The representational image often takes a political situation as a subject that it represents. Yeah, like, you know, Picasso's Guernica is a representational image. Yeah, but of course not only. It's immediately gets complicated, but you can take you can make your work about sides of injustice, of domination, of inequality, of unfairness. That would be the representational way of doing politics through art. The simulacral way of doing politics through art is not by representing atrocities in the artwork, because that would be representation. The simulacral way of making politics or being involved in politics is engaging with the possibility of something new happening. Yeah? But also, this new doesn't necessarily mean making something that didn't happen before. Erasure is also a gesture that makes something new. Breaking something down, covering something with black paint, you know, just not doing anything, that could also be new. If artists all the time produce more and more works, like on this kind of conveyor belt, churning one painting after the other, perhaps making new might mean just stop. Just stop. Yeah? So, that kind of brings us to Nietszhe. That is the, because Nietszhe already makes an appearance in this Deleuze's essay that we have been reading for 3 weeks. And in Nietszhe, this notion of art as life is taken up and understood through this very peculiar figure with which we finished last session of the eternal return or eternal recurrence. Do you remember? Last week we had the sticky notes, and the point I was making about the image, because we said we're going to look today at what Nietszhe has to say about eternal return or eternal recurrence. But there was a way to somehow understand what he's talking about, specifically in relation to the way the photographic image is produced. Now, so let's revisit. So if you've been following so far what we've been discussing, we kind of have two things on the table, okay? We have the representational image on the table, and we have the simulacrum, yeah? What we need to understand is that these are not two separate objects. They are the same object, yeah? Or maybe object is not the right word. But don't start going around classifying simulacra representation. That's not going to work, even if you go into a museum. I want to try to understand why by going back to this example of photography. So let's talk about the photograph as we know it. The photograph as a square printed surface. Let's just talk about it for a second. The printed surface that has some kind of shapes that we can optically look at and recognize and read. So you have this image on the one dimension of it is the way we read it as a picture. You know, we look at the photograph, and before thinking about it, before switching on any kind of analytical tools, we see what it is. It's a cat, it's a house, you know, it's a landing on the moon. We just know it's there. It's almost like our gaze pierced the surface of the image and went through all the way to the moon, the landing, and the touchdown. It just happens somehow when we are looking at this picture. That is this famous umbilical cord that Bart is talking about. That happens. No one yet took it away, even though we might see about it in a while. But there is another dimension to this very same image. And this dimension appears to us when instead of looking at its surface, we almost kind of turn it around and look at it sideways. We look at its thickness. Yeah? So because as long as you think about it as this, or don't think about it at all, as long as for you it is the landing of the moon, yeah, what is the thickness of this picture? Well, it has no thickness because its thickness is precisely the distance between the picture and the actual landing. And when you look at it, you see the landing. The distance, the thickness is exactly zero. Yeah? Okay, are you with it? Right. But if you just turn this image sideways, then what happens? First, you stop seeing the picture because it's sideways now. Yeah? When it's sideways, you don't see the picture so much. Maybe you see a little bit, but you just see this line. Yeah? This line. Now what is it? Well, it could be as thin as just the paper. Or it could also be a whole stack of these pictures. Yeah? Just stack one after the other. You could just keep removing the one, like removing the mask in the theater, and what is beneath? Another mask, and what is beneath? Another mask. How many masks you have? Well, how long you have? We can do it all day. There is nothing there besides another mask. So how many images there are? Well, as many as you printed. But how many you can print? You can print an infinite amount. Will they all be identical? Nonsense. None of them. They are not identical. Each one occupies a different space on the table. You cannot have two of them occupying the same space. Yeah, because even if you put one on top of the other, then one is higher than the other. So two of them cannot occupy the same space. They are, even on that level, they are already different. Yeah, but also they have some tiny differences between them, because the process is not flawless. There are always some kind of frictions happening. If you work in the dark, the developer might be a different temperature. You might just, between different copies, there might be some small changes. Yeah, nothing is perfect. If you talk about digital images, then of course there are noises in transmission. So the same file sent to two different computers might have some differences between them. We had this year, we had one of the students, Maximilian, who did his work about that. Because there was this printer churning out the same picture over and over and over again until it transmutes into something else without any external input, just by the process of continuous regurgitating the same data. Yeah. So that's just to say that all these copies of this image are not identical. I'm only saying that. I'm only kind of spending time on that because people so often talk about photographs as being identical. And I want you to know better than that. Yeah, they're not. In a very deep sense, it's a bit like the famous Mona Lisas. If you Google them and you have all this screen full of different pictures, then you see how different they are from each other. But if you put, you know, any number of prints from the same negative, you will also see how different they are from each other. You know, if you read someone like, okay, so what happens when you turn to the side? Then suddenly, what you see is not so much what the photograph represents, but you see the photograph's own internal process of reproduction, internal process of copy. Yeah, because it also works in this book. You know, a page represents some ideas and some thoughts. It takes you to some dimension that the story is talking about. But close the book and look at the edge, and what you see here is it's still the book, but somehow in a slightly different light. Yeah, suddenly it has thickness. Suddenly the page is not so much the message it carries, but it is self-similar, but not identical to all the other pages. Yeah. Now, that's the similarity between photography and a book, but there is also a significant difference. So, with these photographs, we get the sense that one side of photography, that photography is a kind of two-sided chimera, a two-sided creature, like this mythological creature Janus. One side is facing entities in the world and representing them, and that's what photography always does. The other side is facing itself and dealing with a mode of reproduction or making or copying or dissemination. Yeah? So you might say that, as we know, the referential, the representational image, we said, this is the image of the mind, this is the image of the intellect. But this other image, because it's not exactly an image, you know, when you spread all these different copies from the same picture, when you spread them on a table, yes, it is a kind of image, but it's an image of what? It's not an image of the landing of the moon on the moon, repeated 20 times. It's not only that. It's also an image of a certain process that reproduces, that remakes, well, like life itself. Didn't we say that already? Yeah? Didn't we say that life and art in simulacra is kind of the same thing? But then we can be a bit more precise. And when we talk about art that is life, we talk about photography. Because photography is precisely the process, unlike, for instance, painting or sculpture. Photography is precisely the process where reproduction is inherently built in. With a painting, now some painters work with reproduction as their main device. Let's say there would be a painter who would draw a line and then repeat it, or for instance, like your work, Isiara. Yeah, you work with repetition in your. But in many other cases, if you want to reproduce a painting, you need to bring in an external mechanism to it. You need to photocopy it or photograph it or do something with it. Yeah? And with photography, though, reproduction and repetition are not external. They are already built in. Yeah. So it's quite interesting, I think, to bring this conversation, the conversation of this whole year of seminars, to an end by looking at Nietszhe, where this idea that art and life are the same for the first time appears in the end of the 19th century. And he is also one of the first philosophers of whom we have a photographic image. It's just kind of interesting that photography and Nietszhe are happening in a roughly similar time period. But what is really crucial here is that if we understand art as the process